Hello everyone, Jules here. Today I'd like to talk about quite an interesting esoteric book that is not very well known. That is a book that's called A Vision by W.B. Yeats. This is actually volume 13 of the collected works of W.B. Yeats. And William Butler Yeats was originally a member of the Golden Dawn, and he was quite a rival of Aleister Crowley's. They did not get on with each other at all. As a matter of fact, Yeats actually tried to ban Crowley being able to become a member of the Golden Dawn, and actually tried to stop him, but that was unsuccessful, but they remained rivals. So I just wanted to mention that bit of background information. This book is actually, it's a mysterious book, and it's a work of fiction, but it's based on the experiences of Magick that Yeats actually had during his life. So I'm going to talk about what's in the book. The book's about 400 pages. About 200 pages are the actual work, and the other pages are index and notes. This is really worth getting for people who are interested in esoteric systems that could be used for magic, but they could be used for other applications too. And I'll explain some other aspects of this book. There are diagrams in this book. There are, the diagrams are kind of like illustrations, but there's also charts. There's charts in here as well. And I suppose the best way I could talk about this book is that part of this book is to do with a system of moon phases. So it's a bit like the chart that I have in the background here. That's the 13 lunar phase chart, but this involves the 28 phases of the moon, so one for each day. And I suppose I will just start also by talking about what this book, the way that the approach of the book is set out. It's a work of fiction, but it's about an Arabian magician, and his name is Giraldus. So here is the photograph of the drawing of the magician. This is based on most likely a real magician from the Renaissance period. So Yeats based this story on the magician, and it's about a lost manuscript. So it's about, I'll just read what he's got here for the title. It's called A Vision, an explanation of life, founded upon the writings of Giraldus and upon certain doctrines attributed to Costa ben Luca. Costa ben Luca is another magical figure. So that's the introduction to the book. Then it starts by, it goes into the wheel and the moon phases. And there is a bit of a discussion in here about a figure called Michael Robarts, who finds the manuscript. So it starts with a conversation about the wheel and the phases of the moon. So book 1 is where it begins, and he refers to the magician as the caliph. The caliph, which is the Arab term. So it starts with the wheel and the phases of the moon, and this imaginary conversation with Michael Robarts talking to another man in here. And then it starts with the 4 faculties. So part 1 is called the Great Wheel, and it's got, here's all 28 phases of the moon here. And it's got the cross quarters. I shouldn't really call them the cross quarters. By that I mean the equinoxes and solstices. You can see the cross drawn through these 28 phases. Because the Golden Dawn always worked with the equinoxes and solstices, which is part of the reason why Crowley's magazine was called the Equinox as well. So there's these 4 faculties, and for each phase of the moon, these 28 phases, they are divided into 4 different aspects. One is the will. The other one is the mask. And the mask is very interesting. It's very, very interesting because I think it's quite well known that a mask of different kinds can be used for magic during magical ritual. So you have the wheel and the mask, and then you have the creative mind, and then you have the body of fate. So these 4 aspects relate to each of the 28 phases. So you can see how this fits into magic. It also fits into astrology. And the really interesting thing is that Yeats saw this as a kind of alchemical system as well. So there's alchemy, and by that I really mainly mean inner alchemy. So it's all about inner alchemy. So yeah, it's just an absolutely fascinating book. And you have these sorts of charts for each of the 28 phases. There's all these correspondences in here. This is a truly fascinating book. I found out about this book almost by accident. I was watching a YouTube video of a discussion with someone who was particularly interested in Yeats, and he brought up in the discussion this book. Now, I was already familiar with Yeats. I knew he had been a Golden Dawn member, quite a prominent one, because he was a Kabbalah magician, like most of the Golden Dawn members. Yeats and his wife, when they first married, received channeled writings. So this book is also based on channeled writings that Yeats and his wife worked on for several years before the book was written, and then Yeats deciphered what he thought these meanings from these channeled writings were about. And both Yeats and his wife were also members of the Golden Dawn. This book was written in 1925, a few years after these channeled writings were received and documented by Yeats. Yeats did write a second book in 1937, and it was also called A Vision, but it's a revised version. And so the revised version becomes volume 14 of collected works. This is volume 13. The version that came after this in 1937 is different, and it's almost like it's definitely revised. It was reflective of Yeats stepping back from his esoteric thought. Later on in his life, he decided he got more interested in science and its relation to psychology and the mind. So he decided to basically retract a lot of or at least half of the esoteric ideas in this book. This is why I particularly wanted this one, not in this 1925 version, which is volume 13 of his collected works, because I want to just read this, study this in its original format. And anyone who's interested, it is a truly fascinating book. It really is. There's a lot in here. There's a lot of ideas. I'll just give you an idea of this diagram here. Is looking at the cross section of. So you have mask 27, which is the 27th phase of the moon, and how it intersects with the will, and then you have the creative mind and the body of fate here. So this is not a simple book. I mean, it's a complex book, but it's just so fascinating to look at. So this will be another example of the charts that are in here too. So you have got the will and the mask and the creative mind and the body of fate heading up the 4 different columns, and then you've got the different ideas and correspondences for them. Also, these are also each quarter of the first, second, and third main quarters of the moon are related also to the elements and to other things as well. Like, for example, you've got the body, the heart, the mind, the soul. These are all related to each of the 4 quarters. So if you decide to get this book, I mean, it's a reference type of book, but it's sort of a bit more than that. It's a combination of a few different things. It's just a unique book. Now, one idea that is in this book too is a timeline of different periods in history. So you have got the primary one, the primary period, which is to do more with antiquity, and the Babylonian time, which was to do with the stars and astrology. Then you have got the Olympian period and the polytheistic pagan period. Then you have got the Christian and monotheistic period. And very interestingly, he takes this up to 2100. So we're now in 2024. So 2100 Common Era. And he saw that, as he called that, the new dispensation. In the book, this chart is not in this book. It's in the 1937 version, but in the 1925 version, it is in the book, but there's a different drawing, different diagram for that. I'm just looking for that for you. Talk about yeah. It's called the historical cone, and it's all driven up. It's all drawn up with all of the different dates, all the different years. So all of these things here are all the different years and time periods. So you've got the four different books. The final book is called The Gates of Pluto, and that's got a mythology type of thing in it. And I was just looking for something else that's in here too. I hope I can find it. Oh yeah. In book 2, where it says here, it's called, the subtitle is What the Caliph Refused to Learn. But, you know, this is part reference book, part story. It's also a magical esoteric system. The Desert Geometry, or The Gift of Harun al-Rashid. So he's tying in these Arabian magicians and astrologers, and these are fictional names, but they're based on real Arabian magicians. So this is when you get into the geometry, the geometrical foundation of the wheel. So the first part of the wheel is all the 28 phases of the moon and all of the different correspondences and the different aspects. Then you get into the geometry. And there's been a lot of speculation on this book and on this system about whether this has some relationship to some of the concepts of Kabbalah, because Yeats was a Kabbalah magician. So he denies that in the introduction. There is the introduction at the beginning of the book. He gives a veiled kind of denial about that. He says that all of this is basically to do with the channeled writings that were received, that he documented and made sense of years later. So he actually called this, it's called a gyro, the gyro energy of expanding and contracting. So here's a diagram of that here. So these geometric diagrams are in here, but it's all about the expanding and contraction of energy. And he also talks about pairs of opposites here. The pairs of opposites are to do with destiny and fate, will and mind being opposites, and then destiny and fate being opposites. So he also talks about a lunar circle and a solar circle on the outside here. That's another diagram. So you would really think of this as like a gyro, and he talks about the gyres. He calls them gyres. The gyres in relation to the phases of the moon as well. He also talks about the great year in classical antiquity, the sun's annual journey, so he also talks about each of these stages of history too that are in the diagram that I showed. He talks about each of these as well, which is really interesting. The book of The Gates of Pluto, the final book, part 4, is very interesting too. For example, one of the chapters is communication with spirits and the nature of sleep. He was sort of ahead of his time in this way, in the Western world. He was ahead of his time. And he's got a very long poem here called All Souls Night. That's the other thing about his poetry. His poetry is very lyrical, and even the theme of roses in his poetry is actually a veiled reference to Rosicrucianism. So there are appendices at the back. There's a lot of notes at the back. There's appendices. The appendices are more like notes, though. That I wouldn't recommend that you spend too much time, if you get the book, on the appendices as far as the charts, these charts in the back, because I think you'll find them. I don't find those appendices, the chart one, very. I find that a little bit. Not confusing, but I think it's information that you don't particularly need, because it's what it's about is just corrections over time to Yeats' copies of the different copies that he made of the Vision manuscript. So you really don't need that. I think it's better to just concentrate on the actual work and not think about changes or alterations that were made over time. I really don't think that's all that useful, because it is quite a complex book. And an index, which you particularly need with this book. You do need an index, absolutely. Okay. On the back of the book, it's also listed all the different volumes of the Yeats, but it's also here as well. Here it's all listed, all the different volumes. But for example, if volume 11 is Mythologies, it's written a book on mythologies, volume 11. Yeah, okay. I think that's all I really need to say for today. For people who are interested, W.B. Yeats, A Vision, the 1925 version. This is volume 13 of Yeats' collected works. I think it is really worthwhile for people who are interested in looking at a different esoteric system. Not only how this could apply to magic, but psychology. Because this is to do with the 28 phases of the moon, and there is an allocated or referral, there's a referred mask, there's a corresponding mask for each of the 28 phases of the moon. I mean, it's not an esoteric writing in that way, but it's also like a semi-psychological sort of thought as well. And I was just going to say too, at the back of the pages, the following part of the pages where you have all of these diagrams with correspondences, you have further explanation of different phases. Like, for example, one of them is called self-knowledge, another one is unity of being, sanctity, which is like a purification, different forms of wisdom, the different aspects of emotional, physical, spiritual, general character of the creative mind, what types of creative mind sets that are allocated. And so even what is really useful too is where you've got a table of the quarters, those 4 quarters, where you've got all the different aspects in relation to those as well. Okay, and one more thing I should mention. At the back of, not the back, but the follow-on from that, what I was just talking about, he calls them 28 embodiments, and he mentions tinctures. Now tinctures, that is alchemy. So the opening of the tincture. So that's why this is like a kind of alchemical work as well. Okay, so I think I've mentioned just about everything that's in this book. I'm quite fascinated with this book. I think it's really unique. I think it's the kind of book that you could spend a really long time reflecting and contemplating, using aspects of this as a system, a system of magic, an esoteric system. So I wanted to talk about this book today because it's just not very well known, but it's very worthwhile because it's just so interesting. And I think it's always worthwhile to find out about something different. I'm always looking for different things to revitalise my esoteric practice and study, and how all of these things all tie in and all come together. So I'll put some details below the video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.